the bat, without giving away any spoilers to what it's going to look like,
I'm sharing my screen right here.
Then never mind.
It'll be 2 seconds later.
Never mind that. I think, USC literally dead center in the middle. I think pretty underrated. I think there's a lot of teams on here that we've talked about before, maybe not being as strong. I mean, USC has head-to-head matchups against, multiple teams ahead of them. They're playing Oregon, they're playing Michigan, playing, Nebraska. So I think that my point is there could be a lot of movement that, we couldn't foresee necessarily just by looking at this poll. And you look at the points. The points are interesting, right? Because USC has like way less points than a team like Michigan that I feel like is so unproven. Nearly, nearing 100 points less in terms of votes from the voters. And I just think that's really ambiguous to look at. And I understand like the top three to a point, but I mean, seriously, like behind Nebraska and behind Iowa, I just don't really buy into it.
No, I don't either. And Michigan, I think, is a lot higher than USC. I don't know if you see it there. They got one first place vote for their preseason poll. Yeah. Who is voting Michigan as a number one team in the Big Ten when you have Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon there? Even Illinois, who I do think is better than them. But USC coming in, 9th, 10th? Dare I say disrespectful? I think they're a better team than Iowa and Nebraska. Probably Indiana too. We've talked about that in the show. I'm not a big fan of Curt Cignetti. I think he's running from a lot of teams so he can get easy wins.
Yeah.
Saw this week. They basically paid the equivalent to $900,000. Oh my gosh. They paid the equivalent to $900,000 to play Austin, PA instead of Virginia. That's what it amounted to. I think it's ridiculous that a team like that is going to be over USC.
I agree. I mean, also, I mean, to your point, I don't think they're above Nebraska or Iowa. Like, I think those teams kind of get disrespected by being behind Indiana. Look, I know Indiana was in the college football playoff last year, but I feel like that was an experiment. That wasn't necessarily them.
Well, let's be real. It was a fluke.
It was a fluke. Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. They bring in Mendoza. He's a good quarterback, but I don't know if he's going to necessarily solve all their issues. They got to strengthen their defense. They're not a great team, and I agree with you. I think they're completely taking advantage of loopholes in the scheduling, and they're acting as if the SEC teams do it all the time. But that's not necessarily always true. Like Texas is playing Arizona State, for example. It's not like the SEC teams always schedule bad teams. It happens a lot, but they're acting like it's this thing that happens every single time, and that they're using it as an excuse. So the point is, I digress. I agree with you. I think Indiana is a team that is on fraud watch.
Yeah. This is not an Indiana podcast, though, so we're not going to talk about Indiana. We'll talk about USC. So why do we think that the writers at the media are not very high on USC this season?
That's a good question. I think my response off the bat would be that USC is unproven in a lot of positions, including the quarterback position, just because Jaden Mayava hasn't played a full season at USC. His really good breakout year, he was 2 years ago as a freshman. I think there's that. I also think the D-line as well. Still the defense. I mean, the defense has only had 1 year under D'Anton Lynn. But then my counterpoint to that would be, okay, you look at these teams in the Big Ten, a lot of them are unproven. Dare I say, even a team like Oregon with a lot of roster changes isn't that proven. Their quarterback has played, a handful of snaps I could count probably on, 2 hands. At UCLA, he comes over. And, I mean, look, there are a couple of teams in here. Penn State, Ohio State are the two that I'm like, yeah, they're proven. But, Michigan is one of them that's not. Obviously, I mentioned Oregon, even Indiana. I think USC gets hurt because of the unproven angle. But I think at the same time, they have guys like Jacoby Lane, Makai Lemon, who prove that their game is going to be sustainable for next year and years to come.
Yeah, I agreed. I'm just highlighting two of the comments from Chris here. I'll go back to the first one real quick. Yeah, the O-line is a strength, and I think it's very possible they compete for Big Ten title. I do agree, or I would argue also that it does come down a lot to Jaden and his decision-making, which we've talked about a lot. Just him being able to put the ball in the right place, but I do completely agree that if the O-line is good, then USC easily is a top 4 team in the Big Ten. Then just kind of going down the line. Indiana's, as we talked about a tiny bit earlier, they have set up with the easy schedules ever. Last year, they made the playoff. They were so good at making it seem like they were competitive in the games they weren't. In the 2 games they lost to Ohio State, Notre Dame, sure as the 2 teams in the national title, those games were never once close. And they made it seem at the end by the scores that they kind of were. They were never once close. And they're going to probably do that relatively again, probably win 9 games. You know, the games they mentioned here, Illinois, Oregon, Penn State, I do think they'll lose all of those. But USC, I do agree. Going back to you, Casey, sorry. I do agree it's a lot of unproven, especially since Jaden's played 3 games in the Big Ten. Well, no, 2 games. Yeah, 3 games in the Big Ten, excuse me. Then 1 obviously versus SEC, Notre Dame. And he was pretty solid in those. You obviously do see the cracks in those. We talk about him week in and week out, as we should, obviously. But a lot of these other teams are decently unproven. There's, I'd say 4. What is there? There's 3 other quarterbacks. 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks. 5. I'll include Ohio State here, whose quarterbacks have not thrown the ball as much as Jaden in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously the teams above are a little bit more rounded. You know, Ohio State's the Illinois, I think is going to be a good team. But Iowa, Mark Gronowski coming over from South Dakota, the FCS. Bryce Underwood, obviously a freshman. The other guy, Mikey Keene from Fresno State. Julian Sano, Ohio State. Dante Moore at Oregon. I don't see how you can see that. And obviously, like I said, the teams are some of those definitely probably better around them, like Oregon, Ohio State. I don't know how you see those guys at quarterback and think, yeah, they're just definitely worse than Jayden Maiava. I did see, and talk for a second, because I did see another list.
Yeah.
It's paywall, so I can't show it. But from the Athletic.
No, yeah. I mean, my sort of rounding thoughts on this are there's the unproven part. And then you also look at, you know, some of the teams behind USC. And I think Washington gets a little disrespected as well, just because, I mean, maybe not from a placement standpoint, but the points. Because, you know, Denzel Boston's an elite player. Damon Williams is probably going to be a pretty good quarterback. You know, we obviously a small sample size too, but that's every Big Ten quarterback. And again, I just think it's one of those things where USC is going to have a chip on their shoulder and let this be a point of motivation. And they're going to want to make a statement those first 3 games that feel like, you know, easily winnable games. You know, so I think that's going to be a big point of motivation. And if it's not, then they got to build the culture more, because I think this is like one of those things where they have to rise to the occasion and understand where they're being judged.
Yeah, and agree with this, Chris. In my opinion, he's the 3rd best quarterback in the Big Ten. I think he's going to be, at least projecting wise. Speaking on the quarterbacks more, though, a little bit, this is not a good quarterback conference this year. It's just not. That's just kind of the reality, especially when you look at the SEC and the Big 12. There's a lot of great quarterbacks in those conferences. And I'm not saying that no one is going to emerge and be great in the Big Ten. I just think that, you know, and obviously this is a preseason poll, but there's a lot of guys with a lot of potential at quarterback in the Big Ten. You look at your Jayden Maiavas. I'll throw Dante Moore in there. Your Damon Williams. There's so much potential for these guys to move up that I think that we just have to take all these preseason polls with a grain of salt, because we could see Maiava break out. We could see Damon Williams lead them far. And because of that, I just think that the preseason poll means nothing, because the quarterbacks, you don't know who's going to be good. So maybe someone like Jayden, Damon, they'll show out, they'll lead their team to the promised land.
Yeah, agreed. And I think my last thing is, I mean, even across the board, even at the teams we didn't really look at, I mean, Minnesota is going to have a new QB situation. Yeah. Obviously, UCLA is, you know, a few other teams as well. I'm, you know, not off the top of my head, but there's a couple returning in that second column of the back 9.
A lot of them. I mean, Wisconsin is, Rutgers has Callie McManus, Maryland new quarterback, Northwestern new quarterback, Purdue new quarterback. Now they're obviously not really threats anywhere, but a lot of new quarterbacks in the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, good point.
Yeah. All right. Well, Casey, unless you have any other concluding thoughts on the Big Ten preseason media poll, like we said, should take this all with a grain of salt. It means nothing. It's possible that, you know, USC finishes 2nd in the Big Ten, could finish 12th. Who knows? So that's all there. But Casey, It's obviously, as we mentioned, it's Big Ten Media Week. What